General Manager Joe Ortiz has been super active so far in his time with the Chargers, and now with some teams out there who are very bad, he should be looking to add to this Chargers roster, and one player that makes a ton of sense is Amari Cooper.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer. And we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen, and to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, the Cleveland Browns are awful. They are 1-4 to start the season, and so that means that there's probably going to be some talks of some of their players getting shipped out, and the Chargers so happen to be in need of some pass catchers. So Amari Cooper, come on down. Love to be able to make that move happen. Also, would like to get a better pass-catching tight end. So David Njoku, I'd like to see you in lightning bolts as well. And on this show, we've been coveting David Njoku for a very long time. And also, we want to talk about some of the players that we want to see more of after the bye.
Yeah, there's a few guys we haven't seen very much of that maybe become impact players for the Chargers down the stretch, and a couple players where they could really use it at those positions. But today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. David, one of the guys that's been floated around as a potential trade target for the Chargers is Amari Cooper, the former Raiders wide receiver that is now stuck in the hellhole that we know of as Cleveland, who's now 1-4 on the season after the Week 5 games we saw this weekend. And it feels like at this point, what are they playing for anymore? It's a terrible situation at quarterback. And Amari Cooper would fit a huge void the Chargers currently have as a number 1 wide receiver. I mean, a guy that would fit very nicely alongside Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnson. A guy that, I mean, the last time he was traded for a round 6 pick swap and also a day 3 pick, but that was for cap purposes when he was on the Cowboys. I'm not sure exactly what it would cost, David, but Joe Ortiz should absolutely be picking up that phone.
Yeah, for sure. I think, when you're evaluating what the Chargers pass catchers have looked like through the first 4 games, I think there's been some promise. I think there's been some positive things, but it has also been glaringly obvious that they have been lacking a true number 1 wide receiver, a guy that can really take over parts of a football game and really kind of kickstart your offense and help sustain some offense, which the Chargers have really had a hard time with, especially the last couple of games. So being able to, go out there, make one move and bring in a guy who is a bona fide star, and is a real legitimate wide receiver 1, I think the Chargers absolutely should be picking up the phone and making a phone call to inquire about the possibility of bringing in Amari Cooper.
The other reason it makes a ton of sense is even with the Chargers kind of limited cap space right now in season, the way that the Browns structured the contract, he would be very tradable for, right? Like this year, you only take on the base salary. His base salary this year is $1.2 million. He's also a free agent at the end of this year, so it could be kind of like a trial run for the Chargers to see how he fits. But we also just saw him fit very well and do a super run-heavy offense, right? He put up back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons with one of the worst quarterback situations in the league. I mean, we're talking about Jacoby Brissett, Deshaun Watson, and you would add an explosive kind of option in your passing game. Averaged over 17 yards per catch last year. He's an explosive guy. I think it makes a ton of sense. I mean, this year, 20 catches for 208 yards, 2 touchdowns in 5 games. Feels like a lot of that's Deshaun Watson holding him back. And one of the main reasons I think that is because of what this dude was able to do with Joe Flacco at quarterback last year. He had Joe Flacco as his starting quarterback for 3 games at the end of the year last year. In those 3 games, he had 451 yards, 3 touchdowns, averaged 20.5 yards per catch, and averaged over 7 catches per game, 150 yards per game, and a touchdown per game.
Wow.
With Joe Flacco, right? It's like as soon as he got away from Deshaun Watson, he absolutely exploded. So I think that if you're talking about a bounce back candidate, something this team has really done a ton of since Joe Ortiz and Jim Harbaugh took over, this feels like a guy that would absolutely bounce back if given a better opportunity.
Well, and I think what's kind of crazy here is that Amari Cooper, believe it or not, is going into his 11th season in the NFL, which is insane. He's 30 years old, so he joined the NFL at a very, very young age. But this guy has legit production, 1,000 plus receiving yard seasons in those working on 11 years in the NFL, and just in 2022. He had 1,160 yards and 9 touchdowns. Like, I mean, it's crazy to see the type of production that Amari Cooper has been able to provide. And, one of the things we were talking about is being quarterback proof, being able to provide production with a bunch of different pass catchers out there, or a bunch of different quarterbacks throwing him the football, and he's been able to make it work at an extremely high level. I just think this is a move that, especially when you take into account the type of trades that these receivers have garnered. I think obviously a good one would be Keenan Allen to comp this one. The Chargers got a 4th round pick in exchange for Keenan Allen. I think probably somewhere in that range is probably where you're looking at trying to acquire an Amari Cooper.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he had Dak Prescott, but like besides that, like I said, it's Derek Carr, it's Deshaun Watson, or the corpse of Deshaun Watson. I mean, whatever shell of him is out there now, it's Jacoby Brissett. Not a lot that makes you feel, like they were the ones making him a lot better, right? Yeah. It feels like his production is very much his own when you get into a conversation like this. And I think when you're talking about just kind of the landscape of why the Chargers specifically would make this move, Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnson have both been great, secondary, tertiary options. Like if they're your number 2 and number 3 wide receivers, now it's like, okay, that feels like it makes a lot more sense. That feels like you could let those guys really kind of play to their strengths better. If you had a true kind of number 1 guy that lines up on the outside, he's an elite route runner that you can go to on 3rd downs. He's a guy that can also make the explosive catch and be that play action guy where, he keeps running the same route, and then all of a sudden you go play action and you hit him over the top. So I feel like Amari Cooper makes a ton of sense in that way. And David, I think another added benefit is it's going to be interesting to see what the market is, because Davante Adams is the big fish out there. We talked on Friday why that wasn't a great fit. I don't want to see Davante Adams or Rashee Rice end up in Kansas City. So I don't think the Chargers would do it specifically to keep a guy like Amari Cooper out of Kansas City, but that could be another added benefit at the very least.
Absolutely. I think there's very kind of little chance that a superstar like Davante Adams would get traded to another AFC West team, so I'm not as worried about that. Not. But I am worried about the prospects of the Chiefs going out there and making a move and bringing in a guy like an Amari Cooper. Because, I think you look at their current wide receiver room right now, it is definitely a patchwork group. I mean, they're looking for guys to try to step up with obviously the injury to Rashee Rice, and I think they still don't really know the extent of that and how that's going to affect them. But they definitely are going to need some bodies out there, and I think the guys that they have, I would be hard pressed to believe that they are going to finish this season with the same amount of wide receivers that are currently on that team. I feel like that's a team that always feels like, hey, if they need to go make a move, they will do it without any hesitation. And this seems like the type of player that they would be gunning for. So obviously it's not the primary reason, but it is a benefit to be able to get this player on your team and keep him away from your primary rival in your division.
And as far as timing goes, like, it might not happen today. It might not happen this week, even though that might work better for the Chargers who are coming off a bye week. A very quiet week for Joe Ortiz. He spoiled us in the offseason with all the moves that he made.
For real.
But something to consider, especially as the trade deadline gets a little closer. What is Cleveland's season at this point? Why keep him through the end of the season? It might have to take, for an earlier departure, Amari Cooper to make a mess of it himself, which, hey, if he wants to ask for a trade, if he makes things a little bit untenable in Cleveland, maybe that speeds up the process. Be interested to see how many suitors he has, but if he's reasonable, it makes a lot of sense for the Chargers to do, because it's not something that should cost you a second-round pick or anything crazy like that. So it's not going to hinder you too much in the future, and I think would help you tremendously this year. And I think another guy that they might not want to part with, but could help the Chargers tremendously, and I mean the arrow for the Browns is pointing the wrong direction, is David Njoku, a guy we've been very interested in the past as a free agent, now potentially could be a trade target for the Chargers, and the Chargers have an absolute need at pass catching tight end. So we're going to talk about that and some other potential trade options for the Chargers coming up right after this. First, I need to tell you guys about LinkedIn Jobs, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn, and that is definitely what sets them apart, is just finding that quality candidate, finding a person that's not going to make you need to fill that same role only several months later because it didn't work out. Get the right fit for your team. Get someone who's going to be able to fit in seamlessly. It's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I also need to tell you guys that this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Halloween lets us have fun with what scares us, but what about those fears that don't involve zombies and ghosts? Therapy is a great tool for facing your fears and finding ways to overcome them, because sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place and holding ourselves back. And this is something I definitely relate to, especially when you become a parent. It doesn't, fears affected me always, but especially since having a parent, you find yourself with a ton of fears that you have really no control over. And that's one thing that therapy has helped me with, is just putting things in perspective, letting me know, what fears are valid or how I can overcome those fears and help myself not have to stay up at night thinking about them. That's one of the things I love. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Take off the mask with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. David, Amari Cooper isn't the only Cleveland pass catcher that we were interested in. And after we were thinking about Amari Cooper, then we saw the Browns. I mean, we were thinking about Amari Cooper last week. Then the Browns went to 1-4 and just got shellacked by the Commanders. And it's like,
yeah,
maybe they go full fire sale there. Because, with the Deshaun Watson contract, it just feels like as that keeps progressively getting worse, because that's exactly what's happening. They're going to need draft picks. They're going to need a rebuild there, it feels like. With that quarterback situation, they're going to need some cheap players to go along with that gigantic albatross of a contract. So how willing are they to give up some of their good players? Because there's another good player who's under team control through 2025 that we were looking at, and it's pass-catching tight end David Njoku, who is just an absolutely physical, imposing player who has great speed, a great after-the-catch threat, and a great receiving option, especially compared to what the Chargers have going on. So if we're looking at ways the Chargers can improve this roster and looking at positions they can improve it, I think pass-catching tight end is way up there. So give me definitely David Njoku if he becomes available.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Hayden Hurst experiment has not worked out up to this point. True. And David Njoku is a freak of nature. This is a guy who is like slightly bigger than a wide receiver. He kind of reminds me a little bit of DK Metcalf in his body type.
Just
like
physically,
a guy that just looks like he's chiseled out of granite, like an absolute monster. And this guy's been extremely productive too. He's going into his 8th season here. He has 3 seasons of 50+ catches, and that's really, really good for a tight end. And his 7th was by far his best. Last year, 81 receptions, 882 yards, and 6 touchdowns. This guy has legit, that's lower end wide receiver production for a tight end. And I think the last couple of years we were excited about the production we were getting from Gerald Everett, and we're talking about 300, almost 400 yards less than what he was able to provide. And just imagine what having that type of player, that type of separator, and he is a real separator. He averages 6.2 yards after catch per reception in his career. So this is a guy who consistently gets the ball in his hands and makes people miss and gets extra yards every single time he touches the ball. So adding a guy with that skill set that's very friendly to the quarterback would be great to have with Justin Herbert.
100%. And it also feels like another guy that would fit well, right? We're talking about players who are doing these things and putting up these numbers in a very run-heavy rushing attack, like offensive attack. Like that's what Cleveland has been, right? It's been a run-heavy team.
Very much so.
You're not as worried about these guys, fighting for targets or not really wanting to give full effort on plays that they're not going to be getting the football, because that's kind of the life they've been living. I mean, maybe they get less of a share in Los Angeles, but a David Njoku for this team specifically, I think is a great fit because it helps them not only this year, but next year. He's a guy who's under contract through 2025, and both of his base salaries are less than $1.3 million per season, which means they would be getting him at an insane discount. The other part of it is, though, it would mean probably comes with a lot higher price tag, I would have to think, because you're getting 2 years of control, or at least a year and a half of control. And you're getting a guy who's still pretty young, still very athletic, and a guy that has very proven production at a very small price. But I think for the Chargers, when you're looking at that tight end room, you don't have the answer for this year, but you also don't have the answer for next year either. Like, who on this option is the guy who's going to be able to blossom into a receiving option? I don't see it, right? And we're talking about a guy in Greg Roman who's had tight ends like a Mark Andrews, tight ends like a Vernon Davis, tight ends like a Delaney Walker that have all flourished under this offense. Who is that guy going to be? Because the Chargers don't have it, and it feels like at least that is part of what the problem is offensively, is you don't have an option like that. And we saw a little bit of it last week, right? We saw the tight end screen game start to come to life a little bit. Obviously,
good
a couple
quality
didn't work.
plays, man. Yeah.
If those plays have David Njoku at the end of them, they look a lot different than they did last week. So I think it would make a ton of sense, and it would help you not only this year, David, but make, next year you're going to have a lot of positions you have to fill anyways, right? Like, I'd love to get a tight end in the first round if I felt better about corner or the defensive interior or the interior of the offensive line. Like, there's going to be other positions you want to address at least through 2025. You wouldn't have to do that in this scenario.
Well, and also, like, you just can't ever expect the draft to be able to unfold the way that you need it to. We see it every single year. The Chargers go into the draft with very kind of clear goals and very clear needs that they need to address. Well, the board just doesn't always fall the way that you have it set up, and so you have to be nimble and you have to be able to take the best player available and understand that you're making an investment in this position for the next several years. And, last year was a great draft, or this year's was a great draft for centers. The Chargers were not able to take a center, and so, when they have an opportunity to grab an impact player that they could probably have on their roster for the next couple of years, I think at a pretty reasonable price, I think they need to seriously consider, making that deal.
And you'd have like such a great kind of yak team at that point between him, Lamb, McConkey, Quinn, Johnson. There's a lot you can do there. I mean, stretching the field horizontally and vertically if you get something like David Njoku. But there's another guy I think that would help them, at least for a couple of seasons too, that we can talk about, because, hey, I know everyone wants, hey, go get a new guard, go get interior help. Like, I would love to get Wyatt Teller, who, when he comes back from injury from the Browns, who's been awesome as a pass protector and a run blocker. But they're probably not going to part with a starting offensive lineman. So it's just very hard to find good offensive linemen. Teams are very not willing to trade them when they have them for the most part.
And it makes a lot of sense why they wouldn't. So,
but if the Chargers wanted to get help on the defensive side of things, there was a guy that we saw on another disastrous team, the Jaguars, that could make some sense. An aging veteran, but a guy named Roy Robertson-Harris, who has 10 pressures on the interior this year. And I think, Dave, the defense has been awesome. But the one place that has, not totally kind of flourished yet to this point is the interior pass rush. They got a little bit better last game. I thought it was actually pretty good. But for the most part, this feels like a position group and a specific skill set the Chargers could seek out. And this is a guy who wouldn't cost very much that could help in that area.
I agree. 2024 base salary is only $1.7 million, and then it shoots up to 5.6 and 5.8 in 2025 and 2026. 8 seasons, he's notched at least 3 sacks in 6 of his previous 7 seasons. So this is a real legitimate interior pass rush threat.
Absolutely he is. I mean, and he has 10 pressures and a sack this year. 1 sack doesn't really do it for you, but the Chargers leader in pressure this year is Morgan Fox with 7. He has 3 more than that. The last 3 seasons, he's had at least 35 pressures in each of those seasons, and he had 42 pressures last year, which is more than anyone on the Chargers, usually ever gets on the interior. That's a big number. 5.6 million, 5.8 million the next couple of years, compared to what some of these defensive tackles are making is chump change. I think this is a guy that could help you as long as you want to, right? Because you're trading for him. You don't really have to guarantee him anything after this year, but if you want to keep him around and need an interior presence on this team, as far as a pass rusher goes, he's a guy that would make a ton of sense. He's a guy who's cheap, and he's a guy that plays on the 1-4 Jaguars team that also has Eric Armstead, who they're paying a ton of money to, and some other younger guys on the interior of their defensive line that could get some snaps in what could very quickly become a lost season in Jacksonville. But we haven't seen the Chargers make any moves yet, and there's a chance they won't, right? We did get spoiled. There's a chance they keep the team the same for right now with only 4 games under their belt. If that's the case, there are some guys we want to see get some more playing time, including someone we haven't seen at all this year, DJ Chark, who could be coming back soon. We're going to talk about him, some of the rookies that we'd like to see more from after the bye, coming up, and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I need to tell you guys that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, because NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. It's a great way to keep track of all the bets that you have going on for when you get crazy on a football Sunday and have 7 hours of commercial-free football. You know you're in the right spot, and you have something that's going to keep you up to date with everything. And the odds are already out for the Chargers' Week 6 game against the Broncos, who have won 3 straight all of a sudden. The Bolts are currently 2.5-point favorites going into Denver. This is going to be a really tough game. It does feel like a game that could be a field goal game, but there's so much more that you can bet on with FanDuel. You can go with the over-under, which is currently set at 36.5, or anytime touchdown scores, or you can just bet on the Padres to kick the Dodgers' butt this week. But you can also get started on FanDuel with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet on FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. David, let's continue getting into some guys that we want to see play for the Chargers this season a little bit more that we maybe haven't seen. This was inspired by a question that we got on YouTube from Mark Berry, and it's a great question. He basically asked us, hey guys, I would like to know which players you want to play that haven't played yet. So we won't necessarily go specifically to haven't played at all yet, because there's some guys we want to see play a little bit more, can't wait to see come back. But I think it's a great question. But thank you, everyone, also for just making us your first listen. As always, we appreciate the everydayers out there. If you need a second listen, make sure to check out the new slate on Locked On NFL, which is now 2 shows a day. In the morning, you can get Tyler the Madman rolling, or in the afternoon, you can get Amp, my boy the barber, Tony Wiggins, to give you some real down-to-earth talk with all of the local experts that Locked On provides. So make sure you guys check that out on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast from. David, this is a great question here we got from Mark on YouTube, and I think the first one that comes to mind is DJ Chark, because at the beginning of the season, he immediately got put on injured reserve. He has now missed the 4 required games that he has to, being on injured reserve, but his 21-day activation window hasn't started. So last week, we didn't see him out there. He was still working off to the side, which I think has to still be a positive sign. We will see what we get this week, but David, we want Amari Cooper for a lot of reasons. DJ Chark doesn't fill all of those, but I think he absolutely brings some needed kind of skill sets to what this offense has right now.
I agree. And that needed kind of skill set is the ability to attack down the football field. The Chargers' longest play that they have right now came from Ladd McConkey, and that was 37 yards, and a lot of that was run after catch. Okay. Yeah. DJ Chark is a guy that has the ability to go stretch the field and go hit you deep for a 50, 60, 65 yard type of reception or big touchdown. Like, that's what he's done throughout his entire career. So I think the Chargers could definitely use his field stretching abilities.
Absolutely, they can. I mean, he's a guy that last year was an explosive wide receiver. I mean, and a guy who's averaged over 15 yards per catch over the last 3 seasons. And also, he was great in contested catch situations. It's something we talked about last time, right? I mean, last year, he was the 6th highest wide receiver in contested catch percentage with a minimum of 60 targets. That's very, very good. And I think a lot of those aren't necessarily jump balls, but a lot of those are being able to, hey, even when he's covered on a big play, he can still find a way to come down with the catch. So I love that. I also think when you're talking about field stretching and what it brings, like, he is not a yak threat. I think last year, 2.3 yards after the catch per catch. That's not really what his game is. But you have guys to do that, right? And when you have a guy that can stretch the field like a DJ Chark can, it opens up more space for a Ladd McConkey. It opens up more space over the middle for a guy like Quentin Johnston. So, absolutely, like I said, Amari Cooper fit well with what they have. There's a reason the Chargers got this guy. He would fit really well with what the Chargers currently have in that wide receiver room as an ex-receiver that can win one-on-one matchups on the outside and blow past people. And I think even in the running game, having a guy like that, if the teams actually have to account for you beating them deep, it changes things. It loosens things up a little bit in the running game. It loosens things up over the middle in the passing game. So not every team is just sitting there expecting you to throw, a 6 or 7 yard pass. So I think he can make a big impact. It might not show up in crazy stats right away, and we don't know when he's coming back, but it's something I think can absolutely help. And I think another thing that could help, David, is a little bit more Kimani Vidal, a guy we've talked about before, wanting to see. And I think there's a lot of reason to think, hey, going forward, when you're trying to look at ways to kind of unconstipate this offense, Kimani Vidal kind of brings some of the things I think you want to see.
Yeah, I mean, his ability to continuously move forward. I mean, just very rarely ever goes backwards. He always keeps his legs turning. He always is able to fall forward. And he also has that speed and burst to be able to turn those 3 or 4 yard runs into 10, 12, 15-yard runs or more. I do feel like, he's not really a breakaway speed like that's going to run away from guys, but I do feel like this is the type of running back that can get 10, 15, 20, even 25-yard runs, and I feel like he could rip those off somewhat regularly. And according to, what the Chargers have done the last couple of games, it's less than 70 yards rushing on the ground. And for an offense that is mainly predicated on their ability to run the ball and stay ahead of the sticks and really put in themselves into very short down and distance, more manageable pass situations, the ability to run the ball is paramount. And they have not been able to do that. So cycling in another running back that has a skill set that is at this point untapped, I think is a smart decision for the Chargers to infuse into their offense.
Absolutely. And this is my big thing. Like, Gus Edwards can be a great running back when your line can dominate the line of scrimmage and you can give him a head of steam, and they just haven't been able to do that. That's right. True. And I don't think he's fully there physically either. But the Chargers running game has absolutely missed that explosiveness over the last 2 games that they had the first 2 weeks, and Vidal gives you more of a chance for that. This is a guy that can create on his own and doesn't need a ton of space to be productive. He doesn't need a huge runway to be able to be a productive running back. I mean, he can take a small seam and make a big play out of it. I mean, last year, according to PFF, he forced 94 missed tackles, second in the country. Like, this is a dude. Like, right now, your offensive line is struggling. You need someone that can create a little bit, and it's a fine line because you don't want to take those negative plays, but the Chargers are getting minimal gains anyways. This is a guy that might give you that spark that you need offensively to get some drives going. Give your defense a break because they're an awesome defense if you can give them some time and aren't keeping them out there consistently. And it feels like I understand the Gus Edwards part of it, but this is a dude who's great in pass protection, brings explosiveness.
Really good.
And he might not bring the special teams value that Hassan Haskins brings, but I trust Ryan Ficken to find another Hassan Haskins at another position if he has to. I agree. Right? I don't really care that much about that. I think they'll be fine without him. Give me more help offensively where the Chargers desperately need it right now and have totally struggled the last 2 weeks. But another guy, David, I wanted to bring up, and you had also talked about before the show, is Junior Colson. I mean, I also want to see more Tier Tart. Only played 44 defensive snaps so far this year through 4 games. Has 23 pass rushing snaps and 4 pressures on those, so I want to see that. But I know when he gets back from his injury, David, we're all excited about the rookie Junior Colson.
Yeah, I am. I'm very excited about what he's gonna be able to do. I still have really high expectations for what he's going to be able to do for the Chargers, not only this year, but in the future as well. I feel like his ability to really kind of flow in coverage and to be able to shed blocks and be able to explode through ball carriers is, a skill set I feel like I can't wait to see, paired up with Deion Henley. I feel like no disrespect to Denzel Perriman because he's been playing fantastic this year. Yeah. But I just feel like, he adds another element of another linebacker that you feel like is not a liability in coverage when, he has his legs under him. So hopefully that hamstring injury is, behind him and he can go out there and play fast and play physical football.
And let's give credit where credit's due because Denzel Perriman, easily the biggest Achilles heel that he had in 2023 was his coverage. And he's been really good so far in 2024 in coverage. So he's definitely turning back the hands of time a little bit. I love Denzel Perriman. I mean, he misses a little too many tackles this year for my liking. He's got to clean that up a little bit. That short arms T-Rex guy. But yeah, I mean, Junior Colson just brings a different kind of athletic element to the field that I think the Chargers could use. Great instincts, the ability to, stop players in the backfield, shoot gaps, and create huge plays for you. I think as a pass rusher, he brings some athleticism and juice that could help for a team that has blitzed, when Jesse Minter wants to quite a bit. I mean, that at least rushes a lot of different guys, right? Like sometimes they're not even blitzes. You just don't know which 4 guys are coming. But like he's a guy that can help in that aspect too. So, maybe it starts in obvious passing situations to get him out there a little bit more. Maybe you just, we know Jesse Minter was using the green dot on all 3 of these linebackers. So The top two guys you have are good, but I still think that Junior Colson, when he gets back, will bring a different element to that room. And I'm very, very excited to see it. And I'm just excited. I mean, the football, watching it and missing the Chargers this Sunday sucked, but it just makes me so excited for what this team can do down the stretch. There's a lot of openings in the AFC right now, a lot of bad teams.
Hopefully much healthier, Dan.
Absolutely. I mean, and the Chargers should be getting healthy, and we'll see what they can do. But I'm excited under this Jim Harbaugh era to have faith and hope that, and have realistic hope that this season can turn around and they can contend for a playoff spot in 2024. So that's gonna wrap things up for today's show. We'll be back with you guys tomorrow, as we always are, and it's Tuesday, so it's Buy or Sell Tuesday, getting into the biggest Charger storylines and overreactions. So make sure you guys hit us up at Locked On LAC, where we post a show every day too. But you can also get your questions and buy or sells in there as well. You can also call into the voicemail line at 323-524-7924. Make sure you guys are following all of our social media so you never miss the show. You can also find us on Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page, or you can just hit up me or David's Twitter. For me at Dan Talk Sports and David at Dro Talk SD. But the bye week's over. It's time to get ramped up for this Broncos game this weekend. We're excited to have a whole week of coverage for you guys with a lot of expectations and hope going into this next part of the season. But we'll be back with you guys tomorrow. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.